Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to PwC's Risk and Regulation News channel. In one of our previous sessions, we gave you an overview about the SREP results 2023 and the SSM Supervisory Priorities 2024 and beyond. And we promised to you that we will make some additional deep dive videos. And today we are going to make the first deep dive video, and it's about ESG risk management. And like always, I'm not doing this alone today. I'm here with Richard.whiting, director from our Amsterdam office and Workstream leader for ESG Risk Management of the SSM Office. Richard, nice to have you here. How are you?
Yes, thanks. I'm doing well, Martin.
Great. Richard, you're an absolutely expert on ESG risk management. So before we go into the details, maybe for our viewers that are new to this topic, could you explain to us what is the difference between ESG in general, ESG risk management, and yes, the ECB is always speaking more about climate risk. That's a little bit confusing for me and I guess for our viewers as well. Could you bring some light into this jungle?
Yes, of course, Martin. So ESG is a very broad topic. It captures environmental, social and governance risks. So it's much broader, whereas the ECB is really focused at the moment on tackling climate risk because they really see the biggest threat to the financial system for specifically climate risk and not so much at the moment for social and governance. And that is something that I would also expect in the future will get more attention, but for now it's really focused around climate risk.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Richard. That was really helpful for the beginning. The SREP results 2023 and also the supervisory priorities 2024 and beyond, when they speak about ESG, climate risk, they mostly are based on the ECB guide on climate risk that was published already in 2020. Now it's February 2024. How are the banks progressing?
Yeah, I think that's very, very interesting, right? So I'm more of a glass half full kind of person and not a glass half empty. But at the same time, it has been 3 years already and they have not complied with all the supervisory expectations so far. That is also something that the ECB has recognized. In his speech, Frank Alderson in June 23 already mentioned that they will put more emphasis on this topic. They also already said they would even impose penalties if they do not comply with all the expectations. And also they made some specific deadlines with all the expectations to be fulfilled by the end of 2024. So what has been going on so far is that most banks have set up at least some sort of ESG risk or specifically climate risk department. Both the significant institutions but also the less significant institutions have really accelerated on this topic and made a department specifically for this topic, and they have taken this guide to start implementing the guide and those actions that are described in there. Having said that, I think there's still a lot of ground to cover. I think on the materiality assessment, as an example, materiality assessments you do to assess whether transition and physical risks impact your traditional risk types. That's also what's different between ESG risk and the more standard or traditional risk type that a bank faces. They have made quite some progress in materiality assessment and also received some feedbacks on that. But really on the full embedding and what are the next steps after you have identified those material risks, there's definitely some ground to cover. And the ECB also recognizes this and has again also, they threatened already with fines and penalties for the upcoming period if banks do not comply with this. So all in all, I think they are making some progress, but still there's also a lot of ground to still cover for 2024.
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. That's really helpful. You mentioned that there's still a lot of gaps that the banks have to close for meeting the ECB guide on climate risk. Maybe you could give us some examples on what are these specific gaps, what are the challenges, and actually, how to close these gaps, which is the most important thing for not getting bad reviews from the ECB again next year.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I think an important one there, of course, is, and I think it goes for any other topic, is data, data, data. So do you have the proper data structure in place to be able to also capture data, to do a more detailed materiality assessment, and also to, for instance, start quantifying certain climate risks in more detail. And this is something that most banks have not covered yet. Also with the upcoming Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, of course, there's a lot more requirements also to start collecting this data. So not only from the risk point of view, but also from other regulations such as the CSRD, there is just more push to start collecting good and granular data. On top of that, the quantification part is quite important. So what are you going to do with all that data, and how are you going to quantify your material risks? Your material risk should follow from a very detailed materiality assessment. So in the first place, that should be just crystal clear and very good. Most banks have already a materiality assessment, but at the same time, they've also received quite some feedback on those materiality assessments that they had to submit in 2023. Some feedbacks include, for instance, the comprehensiveness of these materiality assessments. Have they really included all the risks? For instance, environmental risks such as biodiversity are not always captured in these kind of assessments. So make sure you have that full assessment. And then when you do that, take your material risk and then start thinking about, do I need to start quantifying something for those material risks? Now, what then banks also struggle with, okay, what are we going to start quantifying? Is that the unexpected loss, the expected loss? Am I going to do a stress test? So my advice would be to really think about, okay, where does it make most sense to do that first? By the end of 24, the deadline is set to meet all the expectations, including the integration in the internal capital adequacy assessment process, which also means that if you have any material risk, I would also imagine that you would at least quantify your material risks. As an example, if you think about the Netherlands, for example, you have a mortgage portfolio, pool rot is quite a big topic there, which means that the water goes down and the beams of the house, let's say, are exposed to oxygen, and that can pose a risk for the collateral value. So you could quantify that, for instance. So that's very specific. Make sure your materiality assessments are specific enough and then start quantifying.
And that's a very important information, that the analysis has to be performed always very individual, because simply the risks are individual and depending on the business model, on the location of the banks and where they are operating. One thing that I would like to ask you as well, because that's a term that I hear very often when we speak about climate risk and ESG risk management, and that is ESG ratings and ESG scorings. Maybe you can give us some insights on these topics as well.
Yes, definitely, Martin. So ESG ratings, it has been a very big topic for the last few years as well. The difficulty with these ESG ratings is they're very diverse in nature. So one methodology to measure ESG risk can be very different from others. Now, more recently, I think last week even, there was a publication in February 24 about the fact that banks now, ESG rating providers now need to be more transparent about their ESG ratings, which is really a push to make sure that they're more aligned and there's more convergence in those ESG ratings. Now, obviously, those are the external ESG risk ratings. What you also need to think about is, okay, do you want to make your own ESG ratings for your portfolio or for your specific assets? So if you have a corporate kind of portfolio, that might be something where you want to develop specific ESG ratings. And also, if you think about the CSRD, which especially for the large companies requires them to disclose a lot more information, I think in the future that will also help on building these kind of models, to build ESG rating models and to have a better insight into these kind of risks.
Yeah, thank you very much. It seems like that there's a kind of trend in the banking industry more to look for the internal modeling of the ESG ratings or the ESG scores, because it's simply more specific to the client base. But I think what is very important to consider there is that we are still in the beginning, so there's no industry standard. And we as PwC, of course, we are developing a lot of these kind of models for our clients, but we have to be aware of that there will be a remodeling almost every year, because there's such a lot of development in the technique, and also the availability of data is also getting better and better. Richard, last question for today. I know that you have really a lot of experience in supporting clients in the implementation of an ESG risk management framework, in quantification. If you would try to bring it down together to one sentence, what would be your advice? What should the banks do right now?
Yeah, Martin, so my advice would be, and I'm not sure if I can capture it in one sentence, because that
Okay,
would be very difficult.
allow.
Maybe I can do it in two. So most important is start with a very thorough materiality assessment. Make sure that that's very detailed. Also ensure you take along all the different departments. ESG risk is not something by itself. And also make sure that you document everything very well. The ECB will be going around to the banks again to have a look how you have implemented ESG risk and how you have shown that everything you have written down on paper, that you can also show that it has been operationalized.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much, Richard, for being here today. That was a lot of information, very good information. I hope you enjoyed it as well. If you have any further questions, do not hesitate to contact the SSM office of PwC or Richard directly. We will be more than happy to support you. Thank you very much and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.